The church doors swung open with a sound that echoed through the silent sanctuary like thunder. Every head turned. Every breath stopped. Every heart seemed to pause mid-beat. Naomi stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the entrance. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her curves, her natural curls falling past her shoulders. Her dark skin glowed despite the exhaustion in her eyes. She was thinner than she used to be, and there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless tears. But she was alive. Very much alive. At the altar, Julian froze mid-vow. The words died on his lips as his eyes locked onto hers. His face went from tan to pale in seconds. The ring he held slipped from his fingers and clattered against the marble floor, the sound piercing through the shocked silence. "I do," Camille had been saying, her voice sugary sweet, but now she turned to see what had stolen her groom's attention. When she saw Naomi, her perfect smile cracked like porcelain hitting concrete. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." In the front row, Lorraine, Naomi's stepmother, stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the terror that washed over her features. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Naomi took one step forward. Then another. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step measured and deliberate. She wasn't running. She wasn't rushing. She walked down that aisle like she owned it, like she was the bride this day was meant for. "Stop," someone whispered. Maybe it was Camille. Maybe it was Lorraine. Naomi didn't care. The guests started murmuring. Phones came out. People were recording. This was the scandal of the century in their small community. "You're dead," Julian finally managed to say, his voice breaking. "You died. There was a funeral. I saw the death certificate." "Did you see my body?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. She stopped 5 feet from the altar, her eyes never leaving Julian's face. "Did you identify me yourself? Or did you just believe what you were told?" Tears streamed down Julian's face. "Naomi, we all thought." "You thought wrong," Naomi said simply. She turned her gaze to Camille, who was now backing away from the altar, her white dress trailing behind her. "Hello, sister. That's a beautiful dress. Is it comfortable? Does it feel good to wear white while standing on a foundation of lies?" Camille's face twisted. "You don't understand. You were gone. You left him. I died, Camille. Or at least, that's what Mother told everyone." Naomi shifted her attention to Lorraine, who looked like she might pass out. "Isn't that right, Lorraine? You told them I was dead. You held a funeral. You comforted my grieving fiancé. And then you pushed your daughter into my place before my side of the bed even got cold." The church exploded with gasps and whispers. People were standing now, craning their necks to see better, to hear better. This was better than any television drama they'd ever watched. "That's not, I can explain," Lorraine started, but her voice was shaking so badly the words barely made sense. "Explain what?" Naomi's voice rose for the first time, emotion cracking through her careful control. "Explain how you told everyone I died in a car accident in Paris? Explain how you bribed officials to create a fake death certificate? Explain how you changed all the phone numbers so I couldn't reach anyone when I finally recovered from pneumonia? Explain how you stole my life." Julian swayed on his feet. 2 groomsmen rushed forward to steady him. "Pneumonia?" he whispered. "You were sick? You were alive and sick and I wasn't there?" "You weren't there because you were told I was dead," Naomi said, and now her voice softened with genuine pain. "You were told I was gone and you believed it without question. You moved on. Fast. I grieved for you," Julian said, his voice raw. "I was destroyed. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wanted to die too. Camille was there. She helped me. She took advantage," Naomi finished. "She and her mother saw an opportunity and they took it. They saw you vulnerable and broken, and instead of helping you heal, they replaced me." Camille was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks in black streams. "I loved him too," she sobbed. "I always loved him. You had everything, Naomi. Everything. You were always the pretty one, the smart one, the one everyone loved. For once, I just wanted something that was yours." The honesty of it was almost worse than the lies. Naomi felt something twist in her chest, but she refused to let it show on her face. "So you helped your mother fake my death." "I didn't know she was going to," Camille started, but Lorraine cut her off. "Shut up, Camille. Don't say another word." But it was too late. The truth was spilling out like water from a broken dam, and there was no stopping it now. Naomi reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. She held it up for everyone to see. "I have evidence. All of it. The fake death certificate. The bribed officials. The bank records showing payments made to falsify documents. Every lie, every crime, documented and ready for the police. As if on cue, sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer. Naomi had called them before entering the church. She timed it perfectly. Lorraine's face went from pale to green. You wouldn't. I already did, Naomi said. She looked at Julian one last time. He was on his knees now, sobbing, reaching for her. She felt nothing but pity. Goodbye, Julian. I hope you find what you're looking for someday. But it won't be me. She turned and walked back down the aisle, her head held high, as the police entered through the doors she'd just walked through. Behind her, chaos erupted. Lorraine tried to run. Camille collapsed in her wedding dress, wailing. Julian called Naomi's name over and over, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. But Naomi didn't look back. She'd spent too long looking back, trapped in the past. Now she was walking forward into a future that was finally, completely her own. 3 years earlier life had been simple. Beautiful even. Naomi remembered it in colors, bright yellows and soft blues, the kind of colors that made everything feel possible. She'd met Julian at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. She'd been running late for work, juggling her laptop bag, her phone, and a presentation folder that kept trying to escape her grip. She hadn't been watching where she was going, and she'd collided directly into a man holding 2 cups of coffee. The coffee had gone everywhere. All over his white shirt. All over her cream blouse. They'd both frozen, staring at each other in horror, and then they'd both started laughing at the exact same time. I am so sorry, Naomi had said, grabbing napkins from a nearby dispenser and trying to help clean his shirt, which only made things worse. No, I should have been watching, Julian had insisted, taking the napkins from her with a grin that made her heart do a strange little flip. I'm Julian, by the way. Julian Price. Naomi Foster, she'd replied, and when their hands touched as he handed her more napkins, she'd felt something electric pass between them. They'd both been late to work that day. But they'd exchanged numbers. And that evening Julian had called her. I figure I owe you a coffee, he'd said. One that actually makes it into a cup this time. Their first date had been that weekend. Julian had taken her to a small Italian restaurant where the pasta was homemade and the owner knew everyone by name. They talked for 4 hours straight about everything and nothing. Naomi told him about her job as a marketing consultant, about her dreams of starting her own agency someday. Julian told her about his work as an architect, about his love for designing homes that felt like havens. I believe spaces should heal people, he'd said, his eyes lighting up the way they always did when he talked about his work. Every room should tell a story. Every corner should feel safe. Naomi had fallen a little bit in love with him right then. Their relationship had grown like a garden in spring. Natural, inevitable, beautiful. Within 6 months they were inseparable. Julian met her friends. Naomi met his family. Everything felt right in a way nothing had ever felt right before. The only shadow in Naomi's happiness was her home life. Her father, Thomas, had remarried when Naomi was 12 years old. Her mother had died from cancer when Naomi was 10, and Thomas had been lost without her. When he met Lorraine at a business conference, he'd thought he'd found salvation. Lorraine had seemed nice enough at first. She was polished, elegant, always knowing the right thing to say. She came with a daughter, Camille, who was Naomi's age. Thomas had hoped the girls would become sisters. But Camille had never wanted a sister. She'd wanted to be an only child, the center of attention, the princess of the house. When Naomi's father doted on Naomi, Camille would sulk for days. When Naomi got good grades, Camille would complain they were too easy. When Naomi got into a good college, Camille said it was only because of affirmative action, a comment so cruel and racist that Thomas had grounded her for a month. Over the years, Camille's jealousy had only grown worse. And Lorraine had enabled it, always making excuses for her daughter's behavior, always finding ways to put Naomi down while lifting Camille up. When Naomi introduced Julian to her family, she saw the way Camille looked at him. It was the same way a child looked at a toy in a store window, wanting it simply because someone else had it. He's handsome, Camille had said that first dinner, her voice dripping with sugar. You're so lucky, Naomi. I know, Naomi had replied, squeezing Julian's hand under the table. Lorraine had smiled, but it hadn't reached her eyes. Don't get too comfortable, dear. Men like Julian don't usually stay with women like you for long. The comment had stung, the implied racism clear even if unspoken. Thomas had immediately defended Naomi, but the damage was done. Julian had looked uncomfortable and Naomi had felt small. But Julian had proved Lorraine wrong. Month after month, year after year he stayed. He loved Naomi fiercely, publicly, without shame or hesitation. When they walked down the street together, he held her hand proudly. When they went to events, he introduced her as his girlfriend with a smile that could light up rooms. 2 years into their relationship, Julian had proposed. They'd been on a beach at sunset, and he'd gotten down on one knee in the sand with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Naomi Foster," he'd said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You make every day brighter. You make me want to be better. Will you marry me?" She'd said yes before he even finished the question. They'd spun around on that beach, laughing and crying and kissing as the waves crashed around them. The engagement had been magical. They'd started planning the wedding immediately. Naomi wanted something simple but elegant. Julian wanted whatever made her happy. They'd picked a date, started looking at venues, dreamed about their future together. But then the job offer came. A marketing firm in Paris wanted Naomi for a 6-month contract. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to work with international clients, to build her portfolio, to make connections that could launch her own agency when she returned. "I don't want to leave you," Naomi had said, curled up against Julian on their couch. "Then don't," he'd replied simply. "But this job. We'll be here when you get back, or another one like it will come along," Julian had said. Then he'd cupped her face in his hands, looking at her seriously. "Naomi, I love you. I want to marry you. I want to spend my life with you. But I also want you to chase your dreams. 6 months will fly by. We can video call every day. I'll even come visit. And when you get back, we'll get married and start our life together." She'd loved him so much in that moment it physically hurt. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he'd promised. So Naomi had accepted the job. She'd packed her bags, said her goodbyes, and boarded a plane to Paris with Julian's ring on her finger and his love in her heart. She remembered the last thing he'd said to her at the airport. "Come back to me. Always," she'd promised. She hadn't known then that it was a promise she wouldn't be able to keep. Not because she didn't want to, but because forces beyond her control were already setting a plan in motion. A plan that would tear her life apart and give her sister everything she'd always wanted. That night, after Naomi's plane took off, Camille had shown up at Julian's apartment with a bottle of wine and a sympathetic smile. "She'll be gone for 6 months, Camille had said. "That's a long time to be alone. If you ever need company, I'm just a phone call away." Julian had thanked her politely and closed the door. But the seed was planted. The trap was being set. And none of them knew how badly things were about to go wrong. Paris was everything Naomi had dreamed it would be. The city was beautiful, the work was challenging, and she felt herself growing in ways she never had before. Every morning, she woke up in her small apartment near the Marais district and walked to the office through streets that smelled like fresh bread and coffee. The marketing firm, Beaumont and Associates, specialized in luxury brands. Naomi's job was to help bridge the gap between American and European markets, using her unique perspective and skills to create campaigns that worked across cultures. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she video called Julian. They would talk for hours, sharing their days, missing each other, counting down the months until she came home. 3 more months, Julian would say, his face filling her laptop screen. "Too long," Naomi would reply. "But then forever," he'd promise. Life was good. Hard but good. Naomi was building something real, something that would set up their future together. She was proud of herself. Julian was proud of her. Everything was falling into place. Until it wasn't. It started with a cough. Nothing serious, just a little tickle in her throat that wouldn't go away. Naomi ignored it, pushing through her long work days and late nights. She was in Paris to work, not to be sick. But the cough got worse. Then came the fever. Then the exhaustion so deep she could barely get out of bed. "You need to see a doctor," her colleague Sophie said, her French accent thick with concern. "You look terrible." Naomi had finally gone to the hospital on a Wednesday afternoon when she nearly collapsed during a presentation. The diagnosis was swift and serious: pneumonia. Bad pneumonia. The kind that required immediate hospitalization. They admitted her that same day. Naomi remembered calling Julian from her hospital bed, her voice weak but trying to sound strong. "I'm okay," she told him. "Just a little sick. They're keeping me for observation." "I'm coming there," Julian had said immediately. "I'll get on the next flight." "No, don't. I promise I'm fine. It's just pneumonia. They'll give me antibiotics and I'll be out in a few days. Don't waste the money on a plane ticket," She could hear the worry in his voice, but eventually he'd agreed. "Call me every day. Promise me." "I promise," she'd said. That was the last time she spoke to him for over a year. The pneumonia was worse than anyone had thought. Naomi's lungs filled with fluid. Her fever spiked to dangerous levels. Within 24 hours she was in the intensive care unit, unconscious, fighting for her life. She didn't know then that everything she owned was in her small apartment, including her phone charger. The hospital staff had her phone, but the battery died within a day. When Naomi finally woke up, 2 weeks later, she was too weak to do anything but breathe. The doctors told her she'd almost died. They'd put her in a medically induced coma to help her body heal. She'd been in the ICU for 2 weeks, then moved to a regular room for another 3 weeks as she slowly recovered. During that time, her phone sat dead in a plastic bag with her other belongings. Her apartment went unchecked. Her job, worried about her, tried to contact emergency contacts listed in her employee file. The number they called was her father's. But Thomas was traveling in Asia for business and had his American phone turned off. The calls went to voicemail. The emails went unread. The backup emergency contact was listed as Lorraine Foster, her stepmother. The hospital reached her after several attempts. What Naomi didn't know, what she couldn't have known while lying in that hospital bed fighting to breathe, was that Lorraine saw an opportunity in that phone call. A chance to get rid of the stepdaughter she'd always resented and give her own daughter the life she thought Camille deserved. When the hospital called to inform Lorraine that Naomi was seriously ill, Lorraine had listened carefully. She'd asked questions. She'd learned that Naomi was in the ICU, that it was touch and go, that the next 72 hours were critical. And then Lorraine had done something unforgivable. She'd thanked the hospital for calling and hung up. And she told no one. Not Thomas, who was in Singapore and unreachable. Not Julian, who was calling the family constantly for updates. Not Naomi's friends who were worried sick. Instead, Lorraine had waited. 3 days. 1 week. 2 weeks. She'd watched Julian grow frantic with worry when Naomi stopped calling. She'd seen his text messages pile up, unanswered. She'd heard his voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. And when the moment was right, when Julian was at his most vulnerable, Lorraine had put her plan into action. She'd called him on a Tuesday evening. Naomi remembered later that it must have been when she was finally starting to wake up, her body exhausted but healing. She'd been thinking about Julian, missing him, wanting to hear his voice. While she lay in that hospital bed, Lorraine was delivering the news that would destroy everything. "Julian," Lorraine had said, her voice breaking perfectly like an actress in a play. "I have terrible news. There's been an accident. Naomi, she's gone." Julian had collapsed. Literally fallen to his knees in his apartment, the phone slipping from his hand. His roommate had to pick it up and get the details. "A car accident," Lorraine had explained, tears in her voice that were probably real, tears of satisfaction. "In Paris. She was killed instantly. The French authorities just contacted us. I'm so sorry, Julian. I know how much you loved her." It was all lies. Every single word. But Lorraine had prepared. She'd spent 2 weeks researching, planning, creating a web of deception so thick it seemed impossible to unravel. She'd found a corrupt official in Paris who, for the right price, would create false documents. She'd paid him well, using money she'd secretly been siphoning from Thomas's accounts for years. The fake death certificate looked real. The accident report looked official. Even the photos of a car crash, pulled from an unrelated accident, looked convincing. Julian had believed it because why wouldn't he? Who would lie about something like that? What kind of monster would fake someone's death? The funeral had been held 2 weeks later. A closed casket, of course, because there was no body. Lorraine claimed Naomi's remains had been cremated in France due to the severity of the accident and international regulations. Another lie, but who would question a grieving stepmother? Julian had spoken at the funeral. He'd cried so hard he could barely get the words out. He'd told stories about their love, about their plans, about the life they would never get to have. People had held him while he sobbed. Camille had been one of them. "I'm here," she'd whispered to him. "I'll help you through this." And she had been there. Every day after the funeral, Camille had shown up. She'd brought food when Julian couldn't eat. She'd sat with him when he couldn't stand to be alone. She'd listened when he needed to talk about Naomi. At first it seemed like kindness. Sisterly support for her stepsister's grieving fiancé. But slowly, carefully, Camille began to change the dynamic. She started touching his arm more. Laughing at his jokes. Dressing a little nicer when she knew she'd see him. 3 months after the funeral, Camille had kissed him. Julian had pulled away at first, guilt flooding through him. But Camille had been patient. Naomi wouldn't want you to be alone forever, she'd said softly. She'd want you to be happy. She loved you enough to want that for you. It was manipulation at its finest. And Julian, broken and lost, had eventually believed it. Meanwhile, in Paris, Naomi was finally being discharged from the hospital. She was weak, 20 pounds lighter, and her lungs still hurt with every deep breath. But she was alive. She'd survived. The hospital staff had helped her find her phone charger and power up her device. When it finally turned on, it exploded with notifications. Hundreds of missed calls. Thousands of texts. All from weeks ago. And then, nothing. Silence for the past 2 weeks. Naomi had tried to call Julian immediately. The number was disconnected. She tried her father. Also disconnected. She tried Lorraine's number. Disconnected. Panic had set in. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. She'd managed to call her friend Tasha, who still had the same number. The phone had rung and finally Tasha had answered. Hello? Tasha, it's me, it's Naomi. The line had gone dead. Tasha had hung up. Naomi had tried again. This time Tasha had blocked her number. Confused and frightened, Naomi had asked the hospital social worker to help her. They'd called the American embassy. They'd made inquiries. And slowly, horribly, Naomi had learned the truth. Everyone thought she was dead. There had been a funeral. Her father had moved away in grief. Her friends had mourned her. Julian had buried an empty casket with her name on it. And no one, not one person, had thought to verify that there was actually a body. The flight back to America was the longest of Naomi's life. She sat in her economy seat, her body still weak from the pneumonia, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. How could this have happened? Who would do something like this? And most importantly, why? But deep down she already knew the answer. There was only one person cruel enough, calculating enough, to orchestrate something this horrible. Lorraine. When the plane landed in New York, Naomi took a bus back to her hometown, a small city in North Carolina where she'd grown up. She had no money beyond the small amount the hospital had helped her access from her frozen accounts. Her credit cards had all been canceled. Her apartment lease in Paris had been terminated. Everything she owned had been put into storage by her employer, who thought she was dead. The bus dropped her off at the downtown terminal at 3 a.m. The streets were empty and cold. It was November now and she'd left in April. 7 months had passed since she'd boarded that plane to Paris, full of hope and dreams. Now she was returning like a ghost, invisible and forgotten. Naomi walked to the apartment she'd shared with Julian before she left. It was a small place above a bookstore, cozy and perfect for 2 people in love. She still had her key on the chain around her neck. She kept it through everything, the hospital, the confusion, the long journey home. But when she got to the building, she found the locks had been changed. Her key didn't work. She peered through the window and saw the apartment was empty. All their furniture was gone. The walls were bare. It was like they'd never lived there at all. Naomi sank down on the front steps and cried. She cried for everything she'd lost, for the life that had been stolen from her, for the man she loved who thought she was dead. She cried until there were no tears left, until she was just sitting there empty and exhausted as the sun started to rise. Are you all right, dear? A voice asked. Naomi looked up to see an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair standing in the doorway of the bookstore below the apartment. She was holding a broom and wearing an apron that said, "Read more books." I used to live here, Naomi said, her voice hoarse. I used to live upstairs. The woman's eyes widened. You're Naomi Foster, aren't you? The girl who died. I'm not dead, Naomi said tiredly. But everyone thinks I am. The woman stared at her for a long moment, then set down her broom and sat beside Naomi on the steps. My name is Eleanor Patterson, but everyone calls me Miss Patterson. I own this bookstore. I knew something was wrong with that whole situation. Your young man moved out so fast, left everything behind. That stepmother of yours came and packed it all up. Something about it felt wrong in my spirit. My stepmother told everyone I died, Naomi said. She faked my death while I was sick in a hospital in Paris. Miss Patterson's face hardened. That woman always had mean eyes. I could tell. You can always tell by the eyes. She stood up and offered Naomi her hand. Come on inside. Let's get you some tea and figure out what to do. That was how Naomi found herself sitting in the back room of Patterson's Books, wrapped in a blanket, drinking chamomile tea while Miss Patterson made phone calls and asked questions. The older woman was sharp, determined, and most importantly, she believed Naomi. Your father is in Seattle? Miss Patterson reported after several calls. He moved there after your funeral. I have an address but no phone number. Your friend Tasha thinks you're an imposter or a ghost. She won't talk to me. And you're Julian. What about Julian? Naomi asked, her heart clenching. Miss Patterson's face was sympathetic. He moved across town. I have his new address. But Naomi, honey, there's something else you need to know. What? He's been seeing someone. Your stepsister. They've been together for about 3 months now. The teacup slipped from Naomi's fingers and shattered on the floor. Hot liquid spread across the tile, but Naomi didn't move. She just sat there, frozen as the words sank in. Julian was with Camille. Her fiancé was dating her stepsister. The two people she trusted most had betrayed her in the worst possible way. I need to see him, Naomi said. I need to talk to him. You need to rest first, Miss Patterson said firmly. You look like you're about to fall over. Stay here tonight. Sleep. Get your strength back. Then we'll figure out how to fix this mess. Naomi wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She let Miss Patterson lead her to a small apartment above the bookstore, a spare space the older woman sometimes rented out. There was a bed, a bathroom, and a window that looked out over the street. Rest, Miss Patterson said. I'll bring you some soup later. And Naomi? We're going to make this right. I promise. Naomi climbed into the bed fully clothed and fell asleep immediately. She slept for 16 hours straight, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion of the past months. When she woke up, it was the next day and there was soup on the nightstand along with a note from Miss Patterson. Gone to do some investigating. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. You're safe here. Over the next few days, Naomi slowly pieced together what had happened while she was gone. Miss Patterson was a master at gathering information. She talked to neighbors, shopkeepers, anyone who would listen. And slowly the picture became clear. After the funeral, Julian had been a mess. He'd stopped going to work. He'd barely left his apartment. His friends had been worried he might hurt himself. And that's when Camille had stepped in. She'd been there every day. She'd cooked for him. She'd cleaned his apartment. She'd held him when he cried. At first, everyone thought she was just being a good sister-in-law, helping her stepsister's fiancé through his grief. But then she'd started staying overnight. Then she'd started answering his phone. Then one day someone saw them kissing in the park. The relationship had been controversial at first. Some people thought it was too soon, too weird, too wrong. But Lorraine had been there to defend them. Naomi would have wanted Julian to be happy, she told anyone who would listen. And who better to help him heal than someone who knew Naomi, who loved her too. Camille is helping him keep Naomi's memory alive. It was manipulation disguised as sentiment. And it had worked. Now, 3 months later, Julian and Camille were officially together. They'd moved into a new apartment together. They were building a life. And Lorraine was encouraging it every step of the way. Naomi felt sick every time she thought about it. But she also felt angry. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. Lorraine had stolen her life and given it to Camille like a present. I need to prove I'm alive, Naomi told Miss Patterson. I need documentation. I need evidence. I've been thinking about that, Miss Patterson said. We need a lawyer. A good one. And we need to contact the embassy again, get proper documentation that you're alive. We need to find out how your stepmother created that fake death certificate. Over the next 2 months, that's exactly what they did. Naomi worked in the bookstore during the day, slowly rebuilding her strength and her savings. At night, she worked with a lawyer Miss Patterson had connected her with, a sharp woman named Attorney Henderson who was outraged by what had happened. This is fraud on multiple levels, Attorney Henderson had said. Identity fraud, document fraud, possibly even theft if your stepmother accessed any of your accounts. We're going to nail her to the wall. They started with the embassy. Naomi had to prove she was alive, which was harder than it should have been. She had her passport, but that had been reported as belonging to a deceased person. She had her driver's license, but same problem. It took weeks of paperwork, interviews, and verification before the embassy finally issued a new document certifying that Naomi Foster was, in fact, alive. Then they tackled the death certificate. With help from the embassy and French authorities, they tracked down the corrupt official who had created it. When faced with evidence of his fraud, he'd confessed everything. Lorraine had paid him $5,000 to create the fake documents. He had emails, bank transfers, everything. It was all the evidence they needed. But Attorney Henderson had advised Naomi to wait. If we go to the police now, your stepmother will have time to hide assets, destroy evidence, flee. We need to catch her red-handed when she can't deny it. And we need your father's support. He has the most legal standing to press charges. So Naomi had focused on finding her father. Thomas Foster had moved to Seattle after her death, unable to stay in a town that reminded him of his daughter. Miss Patterson had found his address, and Naomi had written him a letter. An actual physical letter, because she was afraid he wouldn't believe a phone call or email. "Dad," she'd written, "I know you think I'm dead. But I'm not. I'm alive. Lorraine lied to you. She lied to everyone. Please call me. Please. I need you." She'd included the bookstore's phone number and waited. For 3 agonizing weeks she'd waited. And then one morning the phone rang. "Naomi?" Her father's voice came through the line, shaking with emotion. "Is it really you?" "It's me, Dad," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. "It's really me. I'm alive. I'm here." Thomas had been on a plane that same day. When he'd walked into the bookstore and seen his daughter, alive, real, standing there, he'd broken down completely. They'd held each other and cried, and for the first time in months, Naomi had felt like maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. "I'm going to destroy her," Thomas had said, his voice hard with rage when Naomi told him everything. "I'm going to make sure Lorraine pays for every single thing she's done." With Thomas on her side, with Attorney Henderson building their case, with evidence mounting against Lorraine, Naomi finally felt ready to reveal herself. To show the world she was alive. To take back everything that had been stolen from her. But first she wanted to know what Julian would do. Would he believe her? Would he beg for forgiveness? Or would he choose Camille? That's when Naomi learned about the wedding. She'd been scrolling through social media on a borrowed phone. Her own accounts had been memorialized when she saw the post. Camille had made her engagement to Julian public. She said yes. "I can't wait to spend forever with you, Julian." The photo showed Camille's hand with a ring on it. Not just any ring. Naomi's ring. The one that had belonged to Julian's grandmother. The one he proposed to Naomi with on that beach. Naomi's vision had gone red. This wasn't just about taking Julian. This was about erasing Naomi completely, about Camille stepping into her shoes and living her life. The wedding was scheduled for 3 months away. Spring. At the same church where Naomi and Julian had planned to get married. "Are you going to stop it?" Miss Patterson had asked. "Yes," Naomi had said. "But not the way you think. I'm not going to beg Julian to take me back. I'm not going to fight Camille for a man who moved on so fast. I'm going to show up and let them see what they've done. I'm going to let the whole world see what Lorraine did. And then I'm going to walk away and never look back. That's my girl," Miss Patterson had said with pride in her eyes. So Naomi had planned. She'd worked with Attorney Henderson to time everything perfectly. She'd coordinated with the police. She'd made sure her father would be there to support her. She'd prepared herself mentally and emotionally for what she was about to do. And on the day of the wedding, she'd walked through those church doors ready to reclaim her name, her identity, and her future, even if it meant leaving Julian behind forever. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Naomi discovered the full extent of Lorraine's deception. With Attorney Henderson's help, they'd subpoenaed bank records, phone logs, and email accounts. What they found was damning. Lorraine had been planning this for longer than anyone realized. The scheme hadn't started with Naomi's illness in Paris. It had begun the moment Naomi announced she was leaving for France. Naomi sat in Attorney Henderson's office, going through printed documents spread across the conference table. Her father sat beside her, his face growing darker with each revelation. Miss Patterson had come along for moral support, squeezing Naomi's hand every time something particularly painful came to light. "Look at this," Attorney Henderson said, pointing to a series of emails. 2 days after you left for Paris, Lorraine contacted a private investigator. She paid him to track your movements in France, where you lived, where you worked, your daily routines." "Why?" Thomas asked, his voice rough. "Because she was waiting for an opportunity," the attorney replied. "And when Naomi got sick, she found it." The paper trail was extensive. Lorraine had made multiple wire transfers to the corrupt official in Paris, not just for the death certificate, but for an entire fake accident report, complete with photos from an unrelated accident and falsified police documentation. She'd paid him nearly $15,000 total. "Where did she get that kind of money?" Naomi asked. Thomas's jaw clenched. "From our joint account. I gave her access when we got married. I trusted her with our finances while I traveled for work." More emails revealed Lorraine's communication with Camille. The two had been texting constantly, plotting every move. One message from Camille read, "Is it wrong that I'm excited? I know it's terrible, but I've wanted Julian since the moment Naomi brought him home. He should have been mine." Lorraine's response, "You deserve happiness, sweetheart. Naomi always had everything, your father's love, the opportunities, the perfect life. It's time for you to have something good. And Julian will heal better with you than he ever would without her." Naomi felt bile rise in her throat. They talked about her like she was an obstacle to be removed, not a person, not family. There were more messages chronicling Camille's calculated pursuit of Julian. She documented every visit, every conversation, every touch. "Today I made him laugh for the first time since the funeral," one message read. "He touched my hand and didn't pull away. Progress." "He kissed me," another said weeks later. "He felt guilty after, but I told him Naomi would want him to be happy. I think he's starting to believe it. He asked me to move in. We're going to live together. I'm going to sleep in the bed he shared with her, where the ring he gave her. Everything that was hers is going to be mine." Naomi had to stand up and walk to the window, her hands shaking. Miss Patterson followed her, rubbing her back gently. "Breathe, honey," the older woman said. "Just breathe." "They're monsters," Naomi whispered. "How could they do this?" "Because they're selfish and cruel," Thomas said from the table, his voice thick with disgust. "I brought that woman into our home. I gave her daughter your mother's jewelry. I trusted them. God, Naomi, I'm so sorry." Naomi turned to look at her father. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few weeks since discovering the truth. "It's not your fault, Dad. You didn't know." "I should have known," he said. "I should have seen it. The way Lorraine always criticized you, the way Camille looked at your things like she was planning how to take them. The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them." Attorney Henderson cleared her throat. "There's more. Thomas, you need to see this." She slid another document across the table. It was a life insurance policy. On Naomi. One that Thomas had never authorized. Lorraine took out a policy on Naomi 6 months before she left for Paris, the attorney explained. $500,000 with Lorraine listed as the beneficiary. The room went silent. That was premeditation. That was proof that Lorraine had planned this long before Naomi ever got sick. "She was going to kill me," Naomi said, the words feeling surreal even as she spoke them. "If I hadn't gotten sick on my own, she was going to find a way to kill me." "We don't have direct evidence of that intent," Attorney Henderson cautioned. "But the insurance policy combined with everything else shows a pattern of planning and malicious intent. When this goes to trial, a jury is going to see exactly what kind of person Lorraine is." Thomas stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I want her arrested. Today. No. I don't care about waiting for the wedding. I want her in handcuffs." "Dad," Naomi started. "No," he said firmly. "This woman tried to destroy my daughter's life. She stole from me, lied to me, committed fraud. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "I understand your anger," Attorney Henderson said calmly. "And Lorraine will be arrested. But if we do it now, we lose the opportunity for public exposure. Camille will find a way to distance herself from her mother's crimes. Julian will never fully understand what was done to him. The truth will come out in court eventually, but it will be buried in legal proceedings. If we wait until the wedding, everyone will see it happen in real time. There will be no hiding, no spinning the narrative. The truth will be undeniable." Naomi walked back to the table and sat down. "I want to do it at the wedding," she said quietly. "I want Camille to be standing there in my dress at my altar, about to marry my fiancé when I walk through those doors. I want her to feel what I felt when I realized my whole life had been stolen. Just for a moment, I want her to know how it feels to have everything ripped away." Miss Patterson smiled grimly. "Revenge is a dish best served cold." "This isn't revenge," Naomi corrected. "This is justice. And yes, I want them to suffer a little. Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you human," her father said. "And after what they did to you, you're entitled to a little righteous anger." Over the next few weeks they finalized their plans. The police were briefed and ready to move. Attorney Henderson had all the evidence organized and prepared. Thomas had filed for divorce from Lorraine, but the papers wouldn't be served until after the confrontation at the wedding. They didn't want to tip her off that anything was wrong. Naomi used the time to heal both physically and emotionally. She worked in Miss Patterson's bookstore, finding comfort in the quiet routine of helping customers and organizing shelves. The older woman had become like a second mother to her, offering wisdom and kindness without judgment. "What are you going to do after?" Miss Patterson asked one afternoon as they unpacked a shipment of new books. "After the wedding?" Naomi asked. "After everything. After Lorraine is arrested, after the truth comes out." "What then?" Naomi was quiet for a moment, thinking. I don't know. Start over, I guess. Really start over this time. Build a life that's completely mine, that no one can take away. What about Julian? What about him? Naomi asked, her voice harder than she intended. Do you still love him? It was a question Naomi had been avoiding asking herself. Did she still love Julian? The man who had proposed to her, promised her forever, and then moved on to her stepsister within months of her supposed death? I love who I thought he was, Naomi said finally. I love the memory of what we had. But the real Julian? The one who didn't question the story, who didn't demand to see proof, who jumped into bed with Camille so quickly. I don't know that person. And I don't want to. That's growth, Miss Patterson said approvingly. You're seeing clearly now. He's going to ask me to take him back, Naomi said. When he sees me at the wedding, when he realizes what happened, he's going to beg for forgiveness. And what will you say? No, Naomi said simply. I'll say no. Because even if Camille and Lorraine manipulated him, he made choices. He chose to believe the story without question. He chose to start dating my stepsister. He chose to propose to her with my ring. Those were his choices and I can't forgive them. Good girl, Miss Patterson said. You deserve someone who would move heaven and earth to find you, not someone who moved on in 3 months. The night before the wedding, Naomi couldn't sleep. She lay in bed in the small apartment above the bookstore, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that would happen the next day. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a simple black dress, elegant but understated. She wanted to look good, wanted Camille and Lorraine to see that she'd survived despite their attempts to erase her. But she didn't want to look like she was trying too hard. This wasn't about competing with Camille. This was about revealing the truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Can't sleep either. Are you ready for tomorrow? Naomi typed back, as ready as I'll ever be. Are you? I've been ready to watch that woman get what she deserves since the moment I learned the truth. See you at the church. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Dad. Naomi set the phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow her old life would officially end. The wedding that should have been hers would be destroyed. Lorraine would be arrested. Camille would be humiliated. Julian would realize what he'd lost. And Naomi? She would walk away from all of it and finally be free. She fell asleep with that thought, and for the first time in months she didn't have nightmares. The morning of the wedding, Naomi woke up to sunlight streaming through her window and Miss Patterson knocking gently on her door. I made you breakfast, the older woman called. And coffee. Strong coffee. You're going to need it. Naomi got dressed slowly, taking her time with each piece of clothing. The black dress fit her perfectly. She'd lost weight during her illness but had slowly been gaining it back through Miss Patterson's determined feeding. Her natural curls were styled in loose waves around her face. She put on minimal makeup, just enough to look polished but not overdone. Looking in the mirror, Naomi barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was harder than the one who'd left for Paris, but she was also stronger. Surviving what she'd survived changed a person. She wore her scars invisibly, but they were there, making her fiercer, more resilient. You look beautiful, Miss Patterson said from the doorway. And strong. That's what they're going to see, not a victim but a survivor. Thank you, Naomi said. For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have figured it out, Miss Patterson said. But I'm glad I could help. Now eat your breakfast. You need your strength. They sat together in the small kitchen, eating scrambled eggs and toast while going over the plan one more time. Thomas would meet Naomi at the church. Attorney Henderson would be there with the police, positioned outside and ready to move in after Naomi's entrance. Everything was choreographed to the minute. What if I freeze? Naomi asked suddenly. What if I get there and I can't do it? You won't freeze, Miss Patterson said confidently. You've been through worse than walking through a door. You survived pneumonia. You survived having your entire life stolen. You rebuilt yourself from nothing. Walking into that church is going to be the easy part. At 2 o'clock, Naomi and Miss Patterson drove to the church. It was the same church where Naomi and Julian had planned to get married, a beautiful old building with stained glass windows and stone walls. Cars filled the parking lot. It looked like everyone they'd invited to their wedding had shown up to see Julian marry Camille instead. Thomas was waiting by his car, wearing a suit and a grim expression. When he saw Naomi, he pulled her into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. Your mother would be proud too. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. She couldn't cry now. She needed to be strong for what came next. Attorney Henderson appeared from around the corner, giving Naomi a professional nod. The police are in position. We're ready when you are. Naomi looked at the church. Through the closed doors she could hear music playing. The wedding had already started. Julian and Camille were probably at the altar right now, getting ready to exchange vows. Her vows. Her promises. Her dreams. All being recycled for her stepsister's benefit. Let's do this, Naomi said. She walked toward the church with her father on one side and Miss Patterson on the other. Attorney Henderson followed a few steps behind. When they reached the doors, Naomi paused. I'll go in alone, she said. I need to do this part by myself. Thomas squeezed her hand. We'll be right behind you. Naomi nodded, took a deep breath and pushed open the church doors. The music stopped. Every head turned. And Naomi walked down that aisle toward the two people who had stolen everything from her. What happened next was exactly as planned: the shock, the chaos, the confrontation. Naomi delivered her accusations with a steady voice, produced her evidence, and watched as Lorraine's lies crumbled around her. The police entered on cue. Lorraine was arrested while screaming about misunderstandings and mistakes. Camille collapsed in her wedding dress, wailing about how unfair it all was. And Julian? He tried to reach for Naomi, tried to explain, tried to beg for forgiveness. But Naomi had simply looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. You didn't fight for me, she'd said quietly. You didn't question. You didn't search. You just moved on. That tells me everything I need to know about what I meant to you. That's not fair, Julian had protested, tears streaming down his face. I thought you were dead. I was destroyed. I grieved. For 3 months, Naomi interrupted. You grieved for 3 months before you started dating my stepsister. And you proposed to her with my ring. The ring that was supposed to represent forever between us. You gave that to her. So no, Julian, I don't want your explanations or your apologies. I want you to leave me alone. She'd walked out of that church with her head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of what should have been her wedding day. Her father and Miss Patterson had been waiting outside, along with Attorney Henderson and several police officers who were processing Lorraine's arrest. It's done, Naomi had said, and suddenly the strength that had carried her through drained away. She'd sagged against her father, letting him hold her up. Let's go home, Thomas had said gently. But where was home? Not the apartment she'd shared with Julian. Not her father's house, which still had too many memories of Lorraine. Not even Paris, where everything had fallen apart. Come stay with me, Miss Patterson had offered. Take all the time you need. The apartment above the bookstore is yours for as long as you want it. That had been 6 months ago. 6 months of slowly rebuilding her life piece by piece. 6 months of therapy, of legal proceedings, of learning who she was outside of her relationship with Julian and her family's drama. Lorraine had been charged with fraud, identity theft, and several other crimes. She was currently awaiting trial, held on a high bail that Thomas refused to pay. Camille hadn't been charged with any crimes. There wasn't enough evidence that she'd known about her mother's fraud beforehand, but her reputation was destroyed. No one in their community wanted anything to do with her after what had happened. Julian had tried to contact Naomi repeatedly in the weeks after the wedding. He'd sent texts, emails, letters. He'd shown up at the bookstore until Miss Patterson had threatened to call the police. Eventually he'd gotten the message. Naomi didn't want him back. Not now, not ever. Thomas had officially divorced Lorraine and moved back to North Carolina to be close to Naomi. He'd sold the house he'd shared with Lorraine and bought a small place near the bookstore. He was trying to rebuild his relationship with his daughter, to make up for the years he'd been too busy with work to notice what was happening in his own home. I'm taking early retirement, he'd told Naomi over coffee one morning. I missed too much of your life already. I'm not missing any more. Naomi had used the settlement money from Lorraine's fraud case to start her own marketing agency, just like she'd always dreamed. It was small so far, just her and one assistant, but it was hers. She named it Phoenix Marketing, because she'd risen from the ashes of her old life to create something new. Miss Patterson had become family. The older woman treated Naomi like the daughter she'd never had, and Naomi loved her for it. They had dinner together every Sunday, worked side by side in the bookstore during the week, and watched old movies on Friday nights. Life was good. Different than she'd planned, but good. Naomi was happy in a quiet, peaceful way that felt more real than the dramatic happiness she'd had with Julian. She'd learned to be content with herself, to enjoy her own company, to build a life that didn't revolve around a man or someone else's approval. She'd learned to forgive herself too, for not seeing the warning signs with Lorraine and Camille, for leaving for Paris, for trusting Julien to wait. None of it had been her fault, her therapist reminded her regularly. She'd been the victim of other people's cruelty. The only thing she could control was how she moved forward. And moving forward was exactly what she was doing. 5 months after the destroyed wedding, Naomi's life had settled into a comfortable routine. She woke up early, went for a run through the park, stopped at the coffee shop on Main Street, and arrived at her office by 8. Phoenix marketing was thriving. She'd landed 3 major clients and had just hired a second employee, a recent college graduate named Tasha who reminded Naomi of herself at that age. Yes, she'd named her assistant Tasha, after the friend who'd hung up on her when she called from Paris. That Tasha had eventually reached out with a tearful apology, explaining that she'd thought Naomi's call was a cruel prank. They'd reconciled, though their friendship would never be quite the same. But the name had stuck in Naomi's mind, and when this bright young woman had interviewed, sharing that same name had felt like a sign. Work was fulfilling. Naomi poured all her energy into building campaigns for her clients, using the skills she'd learned in Paris and the determination she'd gained from surviving the impossible. She loved the creative challenge, loved seeing her ideas come to life, loved the independence of running her own business. But there were still hard days. Days when she'd see a couple holding hands on the street and remember what she'd lost. Days when she'd drive past the church and feel the ghost of her heartbreak. Days when she'd wonder if she'd ever trust anyone enough to love them again. Give it time, her therapist Dr. Williams always said. You've been through a major trauma. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others, and that's okay. Naomi was trying to believe that. She was trying to be patient with herself, to let healing happen at its own pace. But sometimes she felt stuck, frozen in the moment she'd walked through those church doors and seen Julien at the altar with Camille. Then one day everything changed. Naomi was at her desk, reviewing a campaign proposal, when young Tasha knocked on her office door. Hey boss, you've got a visitor. Says his name is Antoine. Should I send him in? Naomi frowned. She didn't know anyone named Antoine. Did he say what it's about? Something about photography for the Henderson wedding? Says Attorney Henderson recommended your services. Right. Attorney Henderson had mentioned she was getting married and wanted to hire Phoenix Marketing to help coordinate. Naomi had agreed, grateful for the business and the continued friendship with the woman who'd helped her so much. Sure, send him in, Naomi said, smoothing down her blazer and putting on her professional smile. The man who walked through her door took her breath away. He was tall, with deep brown skin and long locks pulled back in a neat bun. He wore glasses that made him look intellectual, and his smile was warm and genuine. Miss Foster? He asked, extending his hand. I'm Antoine Baptiste. I'm the photographer for Attorney Henderson's wedding. She said you're coordinating the marketing materials? Naomi shook his hand, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Yes, that's right. Please sit down. And call me Naomi. They spent an hour going over the project. Antoine was professional, creative, and easy to talk to. He showed her his portfolio, stunning images that captured genuine emotion and beautiful compositions. His work was art, not just photography. These are incredible, Naomi said honestly. You have a real gift. Thank you, Antoine said, and she noticed he had a slight accent, French Creole maybe? I believe every moment tells a story. My job is just to capture it. They exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again the following week to coordinate their efforts. As Antoine stood to leave, he paused at the door. Attorney Henderson told me a little about what you've been through, he said carefully. I hope it's not inappropriate to say, but I think you're incredibly brave. Not many people could survive what you survived and come out the other side still standing. Naomi felt her cheeks warm. I had a lot of help. Maybe, Antoine said. But at the end of the day, you're the one who had to be strong enough to accept that help. That takes courage. He smiled again. I look forward to working with you, Naomi. After he left, Naomi sat at her desk feeling strangely unsettled. It had been months since any man had made her feel anything other than mistrust or indifference. But there was something about Antoine, his kindness, his respect, the way he looked at her like she was a person and not a tragedy, that made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Naomi and Antoine worked closely on Attorney Henderson's wedding. They met for coffee to coordinate schedules. They talked on the phone late at night about creative concepts. They texted each other ideas and jokes and slowly, without Naomi quite realizing it, became friends. Antoine was from New Orleans originally, he told her. He'd moved to North Carolina 3 years ago for a job opportunity and had stayed because he loved the area. He'd been a photographer for 10 years, specializing in weddings because he loved capturing people's joy. "I know it's cheesy," he said one afternoon over coffee, "but I really believe in love. I've seen it too many times through my lens to doubt it exists. Real, genuine, forever love." "You're lucky," Naomi said. "I used to believe in it too. Now I'm not so sure." Antoine looked at her thoughtfully. "Attorney Henderson told me you were engaged once. To someone who married your stepsister at your funeral." Naomi winced. "She told you that?" "She wanted me to understand why you might be guarded," Antoine said gently. "I hope you don't mind. She speaks very highly of you." "I don't mind," Naomi said, surprised to realize it was true. "And yes, I was engaged. I thought I'd found forever. Turned out I was wrong." "He was wrong," Antoine corrected. "Not you. He's the one who gave up, who moved on, who didn't fight for what you had. That's his failure, not yours." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. It was something she'd needed to hear, but hadn't fully believed until Antoine said it. They kept meeting. For work at first, but then for other reasons. Antoine invited her to an art gallery opening. Naomi invited him to a book club meeting at Miss Patterson's store. They found excuses to see each other, to talk, to share pieces of their lives. Miss Patterson noticed, of course. She had a way of seeing everything. "He's a good man," she told Naomi one evening. "And he looks at you like you hung the moon." "We're just friends," Naomi protested. "Sure you are," Miss Patterson said with a knowing smile. "Just friends who text each other good morning every day and can't stop smiling when the other person's name comes up." "I'm not ready for a relationship," Naomi said. "I'm still healing from the last one." "Healing doesn't mean you stop living," Miss Patterson said. "It means you learn to live differently. And sometimes the best healing comes from taking risks on people who deserve them." Naomi wasn't sure she agreed, but she couldn't deny that Antoine made her happy. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen and valued. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, but he made it clear through his actions that he cared about her. 3 months after they met, Attorney Henderson's wedding took place. It was a beautiful ceremony, elegant and joyful. Naomi had coordinated all the marketing materials, and Antoine had captured every moment with his camera. At the reception, Antoine found Naomi standing alone on the terrace, watching the sunset. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Just thinking about weddings," Naomi said. "How beautiful they are when they're real." "This one's real," Antoine said. "You can see it in the way they look at each other. That's the kind of love that lasts." "Have you ever been in love?" Naomi asked. Antoine was quiet for a moment. "Once. A long time ago. It didn't work out, but I don't regret it. Loving someone, even if it ends, teaches you things about yourself. Makes you better. Or it destroys you," Naomi said quietly. "Only if you let it," Antoine replied. He turned to face her fully. "Naomi, I know you've been hurt. I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I want you to know something. I see you. Not your trauma, not your past, not the woman who walked into that church 6 months ago. I see you, smart, strong, beautiful, creative, kind. That's who I'm getting to know. That's who I care about." Naomi's heart was racing. "Antoine? I'm not asking you to jump into anything," he said quickly. "I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that not everyone will hurt you. Some people will cherish you. Some people will fight for you. Some people will stay." He reached out and gently took her hand. Naomi looked down at their joined hands and felt something inside her chest crack open. Not breaking, but letting light in. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "That's all I ask," Antoine said, smiling. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Naomi let herself imagine what it might be like to try again. To take a risk on someone new. To believe that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. The day of Julian and Camille's wedding had arrived, and Naomi had never been more certain of anything in her life. She stood in her apartment above Miss Patterson's bookstore, looking at herself in the mirror one last time before heading to the church. The black dress hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair fell in natural curls past her shoulders. Her makeup was subtle but made her dark skin glow. She looked powerful, strong, alive. "You ready?" her father called from the living room. Naomi took one last deep breath. "Ready." The drive to the church felt both endless and too short. Naomi's mind raced through everything that was about to happen. The police were already in position outside, coordinating with Attorney Henderson. The evidence was prepared. All Naomi had to do was walk through those doors. Miss Patterson had insisted on coming along for support. You think I'm missing the moment Lorraine gets what's coming to her? Not a chance. When they arrived at the church, Naomi could see it was packed. Cars filled every space in the parking lot and lined the street. Everyone who'd been invited to her wedding with Julian had apparently shown up to see him marry Camille instead. Thomas squeezed her hand. Last chance to back out. I'm not backing out, Naomi said firmly. This ends today. Attorney Henderson approached them, looking professional in a navy suit. The police are ready. I've briefed them on exactly when to enter. They'll wait for your signal when you present the evidence. Naomi nodded, clutching the folder that contained all the proof of Lorraine's crimes. Her hands were surprisingly steady. Naomi, Attorney Henderson said more softly. What you're about to do takes incredible courage. But remember, you're not doing this for revenge. You're doing this for justice. And you're doing it to reclaim your life. I know, Naomi said. I'm ready. She walked toward the church doors, her father on one side and Miss Patterson on the other. Through the wooden doors she could hear music playing, the processional. They were starting the ceremony. This is it, Naomi said. I need to go in alone. Thomas pulled her into a hug. I love you. And I'm so proud of you. Love you too, Dad. Miss Patterson kissed her cheek. Go show them who you are, honey. Naomi pulled away from them, squared her shoulders and reached for the door handle. Her heart was pounding, but not with fear. With purpose. She pushed open the doors. The music stopped immediately. Every head in the church swiveled toward the entrance. Naomi stood there for a moment, backlit by the afternoon sun, letting everyone see her. Letting them register that she was real, she was alive, she was here. Then she started walking down the aisle. At the altar, Julian stood frozen in his tuxedo, his mouth open in shock. Beside him, Camille looked beautiful in a white dress that Naomi recognized. It was similar to the one Naomi had picked out for their wedding. Of course, Camille had copied even that. In the front row, Lorraine slowly rose to her feet, her face draining of color. She looked like she was seeing a ghost. In a way she was. Naomi's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked. She didn't rush. She took her time, making sure everyone got a good look at her. Making sure this moment was burned into everyone's memory. When she was about 5 feet from the altar, she stopped. Hello, Julian, she said, her voice clear and steady. Surprised to see me? Julian's legs gave out. He actually collapsed, falling to his knees at the altar. 2 groomsmen rushed forward to help him, but he pushed them away, staring at Naomi with tears already streaming down his face. No, he whispered. You're dead. You're dead. I went to your funeral. Did you see my body? Naomi asked calmly. Did you identify me yourself? The death certificate, Lorraine said. Lorraine lied, Naomi said simply. She turned her gaze to her stepmother. Didn't you, Lorraine? Lorraine opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked around wildly as if searching for an escape route. Camille was backing away from the altar, shaking her head. This isn't happening. This isn't real. You're supposed to be dead. Supposed to be, Naomi repeated. Yes, I was supposed to be dead. Your mother made sure of that, didn't she? Tell me, Camille, when did you know? When did she tell you the plan? We didn't, Camille stammered. Stop talking, Lorraine finally found her voice. Both of you stop talking right now. But Naomi wasn't stopping. She'd come too far to stop now. She opened the folder she'd been carrying and held up a document for everyone to see. This is a fake death certificate, she announced to the crowd. Created by a corrupt official in Paris, France, and paid for by Lorraine Foster. $5,000 to declare me dead when I was actually lying in a hospital bed fighting pneumonia. Gasps rippled through the church. People pulled out their phones, recording everything. That's not, you can't prove, Lorraine started. I have bank records, Naomi continued, pulling out more papers. Wire transfers from your joint account with my father. I have emails between you and the official. I have his confession. I have everything. She turned to face the assembled guests. My stepmother told everyone I died in a car accident in Paris. She held a funeral. She comforted my grieving fiancé. And then she pushed her daughter to take my place before anyone had time to question the story. Julian was sobbing now, his face in his hands. I thought you were dead. Naomi, I swear I thought you were dead. I grieved. I was destroyed. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wanted to die too. For how long? Naomi asked, her voice hard. How long did you grieve before you started sleeping with my stepsister? The church erupted in shocked murmurs. It wasn't like that, Julian protested. She was helping me. She was there when no one else was. It happened slowly. 3 months, Naomi said. You grieved for 3 months before you moved on. And now here you are about to marry her. In the same church where we planned to get married. With the same ring you gave me. Tell me, Julian, is she wearing my dress too? Did Camille take everything that was mine? Camille was crying now, her makeup running in black streaks down her face. You don't understand. I loved him too. I always loved him. You had everything, Naomi. Everything. You were always the favorite, the successful one, the one everyone loved. I just wanted something that was yours. Just once. The honesty was brutal. Naomi felt it like a physical blow. But she didn't let it show. So you helped your mother fake my death, Naomi said coldly. I didn't know she was going to, Camille started, but Lorraine cut her off. Shut up, Camille. Don't say another word. But it was too late. The confession had been made, recorded on dozens of phones throughout the church. Naomi turned to address the crowd one more time. I spent 6 months thinking I'd lost everything. My home, my job, my fiancé, my life. I was sick and alone in a foreign country while my stepmother told everyone I was dead. When I finally made it home, I found out my fiancé had moved on, my belongings were gone, and my father had moved away in grief. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. I had to rebuild my life from nothing. And while I was doing that, Lorraine and Camille were living in the life they'd stolen from me. This is insane, Lorraine finally spoke, her voice shaking. You have no proof of any of this. You're making wild accusations. I have all the proof I need, Naomi interrupted. She looked toward the back of the church and nodded. The doors opened again. This time, police officers entered, led by Attorney Henderson. Lorraine Foster, one of the officers said, approaching the front of the church. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. The officer continued reading Lorraine her rights while chaos erupted throughout the church. Lorraine tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. She screamed and protested as the officers handcuffed her, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. Camille had collapsed on the altar in her white dress, wailing. Guests were talking loudly, some filming, some calling friends to tell them what was happening. It was pandemonium. Through it all, Julian remained on his knees, reaching toward Naomi. Please, he begged. Please, Naomi. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought you were dead. If I'd known. If you'd known what? Naomi asked quietly, kneeling down to his level. Would you have searched harder for proof? Would you have questioned the story? Would you have waited more than 3 months before jumping into bed with my stepsister? That's not fair, Julian said, tears streaming down his face. I was grieving. I was broken. Camille was there. She helped me. I didn't plan for it to happen. But it did happen, Naomi said. You chose to let it happen. You chose to propose to her with my ring. You chose to plan this wedding. Those were your choices, Julian. And they tell me everything I need to know about how much I really meant to you. No, Julian grabbed her hands. No, you meant everything. You still mean everything. I love you. I've always loved you. This with Camille, it was a mistake. I was lost and confused and she was just there. But it's you. It's always been you. Naomi gently pulled her hands away. It's too late, Julian. Even if Camille and Lorraine manipulated you, you still made choices. You still moved on. You still forgot me fast enough to fall for someone else. That's not the kind of love I want. That's not the kind of love I deserve. She stood up, looking down at him one last time. Goodbye, Julian. I hope you find what you're looking for someday. But it won't be with me. And it shouldn't be with Camille either. Julian collapsed completely, sobbing into his hands. Around them, people were recording, whispering, watching the drama unfold. Naomi turned and walked back down the aisle. Her father and Miss Patterson were waiting at the doors, along with Attorney Henderson. It's done, Naomi said, and she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It's finally done. Thomas pulled her into a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you. Outside, they could hear Lorraine still screaming as the police put her into a car. Camille had emerged from the church, still in her wedding dress, being comforted by her bridesmaids. She looked lost, broken, like her whole world had just fallen apart. Naomi felt no satisfaction in it, no joy. Just a quiet sense of justice being served. What now? Miss Patterson asked. Naomi looked at the church, at the chaos she'd created, at the life she'd just officially left behind. Then she looked at her father and Miss Patterson, at Attorney Henderson who'd fought so hard for her, at the new life waiting for her beyond this moment. Now, she said, I start living again. The aftermath of the wedding was exactly as chaotic as Naomi had expected. Within hours, videos from the ceremony had gone viral on social media. Everyone in their community, and soon people across the country, were talking about the woman who rose from the dead to stop her fiancé from marrying her stepsister. Naomi's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from reporters, bloggers, and even a few television producers wanting to tell her story. She ignored them all. This wasn't about fame or attention. It was about justice and moving forward. The police station was her first stop after leaving the church. She needed to give her official statement about everything that had happened. Attorney Henderson accompanied her, along with her father. Detective Richardson, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, took Naomi's statement. She listened carefully as Naomi recounted the entire story, from getting sick in Paris to discovering the fake death certificate to rebuilding her life and finally confronting her stepmother at the wedding. "This is one of the most elaborate fraud cases I've seen in my career," Detective Richardson said when Naomi finished. "The premeditation alone is stunning. The life insurance policy she took out on you 6 months before you left? That's particularly damning. What will happen to her?" Naomi asked. "She's being charged with multiple felonies," the detective explained. "Identity fraud, document fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at 10 to 15 years in prison minimum. The prosecutor is also investigating whether there was intent to harm, given the insurance policy. If they can prove she was planning to actually kill you, additional charges could be filed." Naomi felt cold. "Do you think she was?" "I think she saw an opportunity when you got sick," Detective Richardson said honestly. "Whether she would have taken more direct action if you hadn't gotten sick on your own, we may never know for sure. But the pattern of behavior suggests she was willing to go very far to get what she wanted." "What about Camille?" Thomas asked, his voice hard. "She benefited from all of this. She took my daughter's place." "We've interviewed Camille extensively," the detective said. "While her behavior was certainly unethical, we don't have enough evidence to charge her with criminal activity. She claims she didn't know about the fake death certificate or her mother's plans. She says she genuinely thought Naomi had died, and she fell in love with Julian during his grief." "That's convenient," Naomi said bitterly. "It may even be true," Detective Richardson said. "Lorraine was very careful to keep her daughter's hands clean. The paper trail leads only to her. No emails between Lorraine and Camille discussing the plan. No evidence that Camille knew it was fraud. But she still took advantage," Naomi protested. "She still moved in on my fiancé." "Yes, and that makes her a terrible person," the detective agreed. "But being a terrible person isn't illegal." "I'm sorry, Naomi. I know that's not what you want to hear." It wasn't. Naomi wanted Camille to face consequences too. But she understood the difference between legal justice and moral justice. Camille would face the latter even if she escaped the former. Over the next few days, more details emerged. The corrupt official in Paris was arrested and extradited to face charges in France. He'd confessed to creating fake documents for Lorraine and provided extensive evidence of their transactions. His testimony would be crucial in Lorraine's trial. Thomas filed for divorce immediately. He also filed a civil lawsuit against Lorraine for fraud and emotional distress. "I'm going to make sure she doesn't see a penny of my money ever again," he told Naomi grimly. "Everything she has access to, I'm freezing or reclaiming." Camille tried to reach out to Naomi several times. She sent texts, emails, even tried showing up at the bookstore. Miss Patterson had chased her away with a broom, an incident that made Naomi laugh for the first time in days. "Come near my girl again and next time it won't be a broom," Miss Patterson had apparently told her. Finally, Camille sent a letter. Naomi almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of her. "Dear Naomi," it read. "I know you'll never forgive me and I don't blame you. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. I'm writing this not to ask for forgiveness, but to try to explain. You're right that I was jealous of you. I always was. Growing up, you were everything I wanted to be, confident, smart, beautiful, successful. My mother constantly compared us and I always came up short. When Julian came into your life, I saw him as just another thing you had that I didn't. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from wanting him. When Mom told me you died, I was shocked. Devastated even. You were my stepsister, and despite my jealousy, I never wanted you dead. But I also saw an opportunity. Julian was broken and I was there. I told myself I was helping him, but really I was helping myself. I let my mother's manipulations and my own jealousy guide me into something that I knew was wrong. I took advantage of his grief. I wore your ring. I planned to marry him in your church. I don't know how I became this person. The worst part is I don't think I ever really loved Julian. I loved the idea of having what you had. I loved winning for once. That's sick, I know. I'm seeing a therapist now, trying to understand why I'm like this. It doesn't change what I did, but maybe it will help me become a better person. I don't expect you to care about that. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did. I see how wrong it was. And I'm sorry. You deserved better. From me, from my mother, from Julian. I hope you find happiness, real happiness, with someone who deserves you. Camille. Naomi read the letter twice, then set it aside. It was probably the most honest thing Camille had ever said to her. And while it didn't change anything, didn't make what happened okay, it did give Naomi a small sense of closure. Camille was facing her own consequences. Public humiliation, social exile, and hopefully some genuine self-reflection. Julian, meanwhile, had become a ghost. After the wedding disaster, he'd disappeared. His friends reported that he'd taken a leave of absence from work and left town. No one knew where he'd gone. Good riddance, Miss Patterson said when she heard. That boy needed to figure himself out. But Naomi felt a strange emptiness knowing Julian was gone. Not because she wanted him back, she didn't. But because she'd never gotten the closure of hearing him truly acknowledge what he'd done wrong. His pleas at the wedding had been about his pain, his grief, his excuses. He'd never really apologized for moving on so quickly, for proposing to Camille with Naomi's ring, for not fighting harder to find the truth. Maybe he never would. Maybe that was something Naomi would have to make peace with on her own. 2 weeks after the wedding, Lorraine's bail hearing took place. The prosecutor argued that she was a flight risk, given the serious charges and her history of fraud. The judge agreed, setting bail at $1 million. Thomas sat in the courtroom watching his ex-wife in her orange jumpsuit, and felt nothing but disgust. I can't believe I married her, he told Naomi afterward. I brought that woman into our lives. I gave her access to you. This is my fault. Dad, no, Naomi said firmly. This is Lorraine's fault. She's the one who made these choices. She's the one who committed these crimes. You're a victim too. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have known, Naomi said. No one could have predicted she'd do something this extreme. Stop blaming yourself. It was advice Naomi needed to follow herself. She'd spent countless therapy sessions working through her own guilt. Guilt for leaving for Paris, guilt for not seeing the warning signs, guilt for trusting the wrong people. Dr. Williams kept reminding her that she wasn't responsible for other people's actions. You made normal, healthy choices, the therapist said. You pursued your career. You trusted your partner. You believed your family. Those aren't mistakes. They're what people do. Lorraine is the one who chose to respond to your normal life choices with criminal behavior. That's on her, not on you. Slowly, Naomi was learning to believe it. She was learning to separate her actions from other people's reactions. She was learning that being trusting didn't make her stupid. It made her human. As the weeks passed, the media attention gradually died down. The viral videos became old news. Life started to return to a new normal. Naomi threw herself into work, expanding Phoenix marketing and taking on new clients. Her business was thriving, growing beyond what she'd imagined. She also started spending more time with Antoine. After the wedding disaster, he'd reached out with a simple text. I saw the news. Are you okay? No pressure to respond. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. She'd appreciated that he didn't ask for details, didn't pry, just offered support. They'd met for coffee a few days later, and Naomi had found herself telling him everything. Antoine had listened without judgment, had held her hand when she cried, and had made her laugh when she needed it most. You're remarkable, he'd said. Most people would have been destroyed by what you went through. But you're stronger than ever. I don't feel strong, Naomi had admitted. Strength isn't about never being weak, Antoine had replied. It's about getting back up every time you fall. And you, Naomi, you keep getting back up. His words had stayed with her, giving her courage when doubt crept in. And slowly, carefully, she was letting herself trust again. Not blindly, not naively, but consciously choosing to believe that not everyone would hurt her. That some people were worth the risk. 3 months after the wedding, Lorraine's trial began. Naomi sat in the courtroom every day, listening to testimony, watching evidence being presented, seeing her stepmother's lies unravel one by one. It was exhausting and painful, but also cathartic. Every day of the trial was another step toward justice. The prosecution built an airtight case. They presented the fake death certificate, the emails, the bank records, the life insurance policy, the testimony from the corrupt official in Paris. They showed how Lorraine had systematically planned and executed her fraud, how she'd manipulated everyone around her, how she'd stolen Naomi's life without remorse. The defense tried to argue that Lorraine had been trying to protect her daughter, that she'd acted out of maternal love rather than malice. But it didn't hold up against the evidence of premeditation. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Lorraine guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. "Miss Foster, what you did was not just illegal, it was cruel beyond measure. You faked the death of your stepdaughter, devastated her family and friends, and stole her life for your own daughter's benefit. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the harm you caused. This court sentences you to 12 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation." Lorraine had screamed and cried as she was led away. But Naomi felt only relief. It was over. Finally, completely over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. But Naomi had prepared a brief statement. "Justice has been served today," she said, reading from a paper sheet prepared. "I want to thank the police, the prosecutors, and everyone who supported me through this ordeal. To anyone who has faced betrayal or had their life stolen by someone they trusted, don't give up. Rebuild. Fight. You deserve justice, and you deserve a life that's truly yours. Thank you." She didn't take questions, just walked away with her father and Miss Patterson flanking her like bodyguards. "You did it," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." "We did it," Naomi corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you or Miss Patterson or Attorney Henderson or so many others. It wasn't just me." "But you were the brave one," Miss Patterson said. "You were the one who had the courage to walk through those church doors. You were the one who stood up and demanded justice. Don't minimize that, honey. You did something extraordinary." That night, Naomi allowed herself to celebrate. Antoine took her out to dinner at a nice restaurant. They toasted to justice, to new beginnings, to the future. And for the first time in over a year, Naomi felt truly free. The past was finally behind her. Now she could focus on what came next. 6 months after Lorraine's conviction, Naomi's life looked completely different. Phoenix Marketing had grown to a team of 5 employees and had just secured a contract with a major national brand. The small office she'd started with had expanded into a proper suite downtown, with her name on the door and her dreams becoming reality. More importantly, Naomi herself had changed. She was confident in a way she'd never been before. She'd learned that she could survive the worst and come out stronger. She'd learned that she didn't need anyone to complete her. She was complete on her own. And she'd learned that real love, when it came, would add to her life rather than define it. She'd also learned that love could come again, even when she thought her heart was too broken to trust. Antoine had been patient. 4 months they'd been friends. Close friends who talked every day, who shared meals and dreams and fears, but just friends. He'd never pushed for more, seemed content to let Naomi heal at her own pace. But Naomi had noticed the way he looked at her. The way his face lit up when she entered a room. The way he found excuses to touch her hand or brush against her shoulder. The way he remembered small details about her life and asked follow-up questions days later. And slowly she'd found herself looking forward to seeing him. Thinking about him when they were apart. Feeling a flutter in her chest when his name appeared on her phone. She'd been so focused on healing from Julian that she almost missed falling for someone new. It was Miss Patterson who finally made her acknowledge it. "That boy is in love with you," she'd said one afternoon while they were organizing books in the store. "Antoine?" "No, we're just friends," Naomi had protested automatically. Miss Patterson had given her a look. "Honey, I'm old, not blind. That man looks at you like you're the answer to every question he's ever had. And unless I'm very mistaken, you look at him the same way." "I'm not ready for a relationship," Naomi had said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't entirely true anymore. "When will you be ready?" Miss Patterson had asked gently. "When you've been alone so long you've forgotten how to let someone in. Naomi, I know you were hurt. Badly. But Antoine isn't Julian. He's not someone who'll give up on you at the first sign of trouble. He's already proven that by sticking around while you healed, never demanding more than you were ready to give." Naomi had thought about that conversation for days. And she'd realized Miss Patterson was right. She'd been so afraid of being hurt again that she'd built walls around her heart. But walls that kept pain out also kept love out. And Antoine deserved better than walls. So when Antoine had asked her to dinner the following week, just as friends, he'd said as always, Naomi had said yes. But she'd also decided it was time to be honest. The restaurant he'd chosen was small and intimate, with soft lighting and quiet music. They'd been seated at a corner table, away from the other diners. It was perfect for a serious conversation. They'd talked easily at first, as they always did. Antoine told her about a wedding he'd photographed that weekend, where the groom had passed out during the vows. Naomi told him about a new client who wanted to market a product that was clearly ridiculous but was paying well enough that she was willing to try. But as dinner progressed, Naomi found herself growing nervous. She wanted to tell Antoine how she felt, but the words stuck in her throat. What if she was wrong about his feelings? What if she ruined their friendship? What if she wasn't actually ready and ended up hurting him? Naomi, Antoine said gently, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. Where did you go just now? I'm sorry, she said. I was just thinking. About? This was it. The moment to be brave or stay safe. Naomi thought about everything she'd survived. The illness, the betrayal, the public humiliation, the trial. She'd faced all of that with courage. She could face this too. About you, she said quietly. About us. About how much you mean to me. Antoine set down his fork, giving her his full attention. What about us? I know we've been friends, Naomi continued, her heart racing. Good friends? And I've appreciated that so much. I needed that time to heal, and you gave it to me without pressure or demands. But Antoine, I think I'm ready for more. If you are. If you still. She trailed off, suddenly terrified she'd misread everything. But Antoine was smiling, the biggest, most genuine smile she'd ever seen on his face. He reached across the table and took her hand. Naomi, he said, his voice warm. I've been waiting for you to be ready. I knew from the first day we met that you were special. But I also knew you were healing from something terrible. I didn't want to rush you. I wanted to be whatever you needed me to be, friend, colleague, support. But yes, I want more. I've wanted more for months. Relief and joy flooded through Naomi. Really? Really, he confirmed. I'm in love with you, Naomi. I know that might be too much to hear right now, but it's true. I love your strength, your resilience, your kindness. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you argue with me about art and photography. I love how you've rebuilt your life from ashes and created something beautiful. I just love you. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. I don't know if I'm ready to say I love you back yet, but I'm falling for you. I know I am. And I want to see where this goes. I want to try. That's all I need, Antoine said, squeezing her hand. We'll take it at whatever pace you're comfortable with. No rush. No pressure. Just us. Their first real date had led to more. Slowly, carefully, Naomi had let herself open up to the possibility of love again. Antoine proved himself trustworthy in 100 small ways. He kept his promises, he respected her boundaries, he supported her dreams, he showed up when she needed him. He was also patient with her fears. There were moments when Naomi would panic, when old wounds would resurface and she'd pull away emotionally. Antoine always gave her space when she needed it, never making her feel guilty for her trauma responses. I'm not going anywhere, he told her once after she'd canceled plans because she was having a bad day. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. And he was. Always. 3 months into their relationship, Naomi finally said the words. They were sitting on the beach, the same beach where Julian had proposed to her years ago. She'd been avoiding the place, but Antoine didn't know that. He'd suggested a sunset walk, and Naomi had decided it was time to reclaim this place, to create new memories here. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, Naomi turned to Antoine and said, I love you. His face lit up. Yeah. Yeah, she confirmed, feeling tears on her cheeks. I really, really love you. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. I didn't think I'd ever trust someone enough. But you've shown me that not everyone will hurt me. That some people are worth the risk. And I love you for that. I love you for being patient. I love you for seeing me, really seeing me, and loving what you see. Antoine pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I love you too, Naomi Foster. And I promise you, I will never give you a reason to regret trusting me. It was a promise he kept. Over the next 6 months, their relationship deepened and grew. They moved in together, into a small house with a garden where Naomi could grow tomatoes and Antoine could set up a home studio for his photography. They built a life together that was comfortable and real and theirs. Miss Patterson had been delighted. I told you, she crowed when Naomi told her about the move. I knew that boy was good for you. Thomas had approved too. He treats you the way you deserve to be treated, he'd said after meeting Antoine for the 3rd time. He makes you happy. That's all I ever wanted for you." Naomi's business continued to thrive. She'd been featured in several business magazines as an entrepreneur who'd overcome adversity. Her story inspired others, and she started speaking at conferences about resilience and rebuilding. She'd also reconnected with some old friends who'd believed she was dead. The conversations had been awkward at first, but most people had been genuinely sorry for believing the lie without questioning it. Naomi had forgiven them. She understood how convincing Lorraine had been, how real the fake documentation had seemed. The only person from her old life she never heard from was Julian. He'd disappeared completely after the wedding disaster. Some people said he'd moved to another state. Others said he'd gone abroad. No one knew for sure, and Naomi found she didn't care. Julian was part of her past, a chapter that was closed. 1 year after the destroyed wedding, Naomi was invited to speak at a conference for survivors of fraud and identity theft. She'd been nervous about sharing her story so publicly, but Attorney Henderson had encouraged her. "You have a unique perspective," the attorney had said. "You survived something most people can't even imagine. Your story could help others." So Naomi had agreed. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of people who'd faced their own betrayals and losses, she told her story. She talked about the illness in Paris, the fake death certificate, the wedding confrontation, the trial. But mostly she talked about rebuilding. "They took everything from me," she'd said. "My identity, my relationships, my home, my life. And for a while I let that break me. I felt like a ghost, like the girl I used to be had actually died and I was just pretending to be alive. But then I realized something. They couldn't take who I was at my core. They couldn't take my strength, my resilience, my ability to dream and build and love. Those things were always mine and they always would be. So I used those things to rebuild. I created a new life, a better life, a life that was completely mine. And you can too. Whatever you've lost, whatever's been taken from you, you still have yourself. And that's enough. That's always enough." The speech had received a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people had approached her with their own stories, thanking her for her honesty and courage. Naomi had felt something shift inside her that day. Her pain had become purpose. Her survival had become inspiration. 6 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning, Antoine woke Naomi with breakfast in bed and an unusual request. "Get dressed," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Something nice. We're going somewhere special." "Where?" Naomi asked, suspicious but intrigued. "It's a surprise." An hour later, they were driving through the countryside, the windows down and music playing. Naomi had given up asking where they were going and just enjoyed the ride, her hand in Antoine's, the sun warm on her face. Finally, they pulled up to a beautiful venue, an old estate with gardens and a lake. Naomi recognized it as one of the places she and Julian had considered for their wedding, then rejected as too expensive. "Antoine, what?" she started. "Trust me," he said, getting out and coming around to open her door. He led her through the gardens to a small clearing by the lake. And there, Naomi found Miss Patterson, her father, Attorney Henderson, and a few other close friends waiting. "What's happening?" Naomi asked, confused and a little overwhelmed. Antoine took both her hands in his, looking at her with so much love it made her heart ache. "Naomi, I know you've been hurt before. I know you've had precious things stolen from you. But I want to give you something new. Something that's just ours with no shadows from the past. Naomi Foster, I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You inspire me every day with your strength and your kindness and your courage. Will you marry me?" He pulled out a ring, not the ring Julian had given her, not any ring from her past, but a completely new ring with a design that was uniquely beautiful. It caught the light, sparkling like the promise of a new beginning. Naomi realized she was crying. Happy tears this time, not tears of pain or betrayal. She looked around at the people gathered, her chosen family, the ones who'd stood by her through everything. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Antoine slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her while their small group cheered. Miss Patterson was crying too, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Thomas was beaming with pride. Attorney Henderson was recording everything on her phone. "I wanted to do it here," Antoine explained later as they walked by the lake, "because I wanted to reclaim this place for you. I know you and Julian looked at it once. But now it's ours. New memories, new promises, new everything." "I love you," Naomi said, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "I love you so much." They planned a small wedding, just close friends and family. No drama, no spectacle, just love and commitment. When the day came, 6 months after the proposal, Naomi walked down the aisle toward a man who loved her, who'd proven himself trustworthy, who'd never given her a reason to doubt him. As she took her vows, Naomi thought about how far she'd come. From the girl on that plane to Paris, full of dreams and naive trust, to the woman lying in a hospital bed, alone and forgotten, to the woman who'd walked through church doors to confront her betrayers, to the woman standing here now, ready to start a new chapter with someone worthy of her love. She'd survived. She'd rebuilt. She'd thrived. And now, finally, she was getting the happy ending she'd always deserved. But this time it was real, earned, and truly hers. At the reception, Miss Patterson gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. "I've known Naomi for 3 years now," she said, raising her glass. "And in that time, I've watched her survive the unsurvivable and overcome the impossible. She walked into my bookstore broken and lost, and she walked out strong and found. She's taught me that resilience isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and building something better than what you lost. Naomi, you are one of the strongest people I've ever known. And Antoine, you are one of the luckiest." To the happy couple. To the happy couple, everyone echoed. Later that evening, as Naomi and Antoine danced their first dance as husband and wife, she caught sight of something through the window. A man standing in the parking lot, watching. Even from a distance, she recognized him. Julien. She tensed, and Antoine noticed immediately. "What is it?" "Julien's outside," she said quietly. Antoine looked toward the window, then back at Naomi. "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" Naomi thought about it. A year ago, seeing Julien would have shattered her. But now, dancing with her husband, surrounded by people who truly loved her, she felt nothing but pity for the man she used to love. "No," she said. "Let him watch. Let him see what he lost. Let him see what real love looks like." She pulled Antoine closer and kept dancing, never looking back toward the window. After a few minutes, when she glanced again, Julien was gone. "He left," Antoine said. "Good," Naomi replied. "This day is about us, not him." "This life is about us," Antoine corrected, kissing her forehead. "Just us. No ghosts, no shadows, no past. Just our future." And as they continued to dance, Naomi believed it. She'd spent too long looking back, trapped by betrayal and pain. Now she was looking forward. To a life with Antoine. To building Phoenix Marketing into something even bigger. To maybe, someday having children. To growing old with someone who would never give up on her. The past would always be part of her story. The illness in Paris, the fake death, the stolen life, the wedding confrontation. Those were chapters she couldn't erase. But they were no longer the only chapters. They were no longer even the most important chapters. This was her story now. The story of a woman who'd been knocked down and got back up. Who'd had everything stolen and built something better. Who'd been betrayed and learned to trust again. Who'd survived and chose to thrive. And it was a story that was just beginning.
Richard Williams was a billionaire in Lagos, owner of oil wells, sprawling estates, and a mansion in Ikoyi guarded like a fortress. From the outside, his life looked untouchable. Fleets of cars, political connections, and a daughter, Emily, in one of the best international schools on Victoria Island. Yet behind that power was a man haunted by an emptiness money had never filled. He had grown up under strict, loveless parents who believed success was all that mattered. And he carried that same coldness into his own parenting. But just across the same city, under the blistering sun and chaos of Lagos traffic, lived David, a 12-year-old boy with torn slippers and a sack of recyclables slung over his bony shoulder. His backstory was one of quiet tragedy. His father had died of a sickness the family couldn't afford to treat, and his mother struggled as a roadside food seller. David had no classroom, no teachers, no luxury, only the scraps of textbooks he rescued from trash heaps. Yet, unlike most children his age, he carried himself with a quiet fire, teaching himself mathematics late at night under streetlights while the city roared on. Richard's daughter Emily was caught between those two worlds. Unlike her father, she was tender-hearted and curious, traits she inherited from the mother she lost at a young age. Though she lived in privilege, Emily longed for simple joy, something her father's wealth could never give. And then one ordinary afternoon at the school gate, those worlds collided. Richard pulled up in his black Range Rover, expecting to see Emily waiting for her driver. Instead, his eyes locked on a scene that froze him. Emily sitting on the dusty ground smiling for the first time in months, beside David, the trash-picking boy. With nothing but stones and bottle caps, David was teaching her mathematics, something expensive tutors had failed to do. In that fleeting moment, Richard saw not just his daughter learning, but a mirror of everything he had ignored in life: humility, wisdom, and love in the most unexpected place. That encounter would test his pride, challenge his beliefs, and change his destiny. But why would a billionaire's daughter find comfort in the lessons of a boy who lived off the streets? What hidden strength did David carry that even money couldn't buy? And what would Richard do when he discovered that the boy teaching his daughter was actually teaching him the greatest lesson of all? Sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into this interesting story. The afternoon sun in Victoria Island burned hot against the asphalt. School was just closing at one of Lagos's most prestigious international academies. SUVs and sedans lined up outside the gates, chauffeurs in dark suits waiting to collect the children. The air smelled faintly of exhaust fumes mixed with the sweet aroma of roasted corn sold by a woman at the roadside. Inside a black Range Rover with tinted windows, Richard Williams adjusted his gold wristwatch impatiently. He was a man who lived on schedules, his life measured in boardroom meetings and business calls. Today, he had cleared a space in his calendar, not for leisure but to personally pick up his daughter, Emily. His assistants often handled such things, but Richard had been troubled. Despite paying top tutors, Emily still struggled with mathematics. He planned to have a stern word with her about discipline, but as his vehicle inched closer to the school gate, a strange sight pulled him upright. He saw his daughter not in her neat uniformed line with her classmates, but seated on the ground outside the gate. Beside her sat a boy. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. His shirt was faded and torn, his slippers nearly worn out. A sack full of plastic bottles and empty cans leaned against his side. He used stones and bottle caps to sketch numbers into the dusty ground. Emily, his daughter, leaned forward eagerly, clapping her hands as if the lesson was a game. Richard blinked hard. His daughter, the child of a billionaire, educated in the most expensive school money could buy, was learning mathematics from a boy who scavenged through trash. For a moment, anger flared in him. What nonsense was this? But then he caught something that froze his words before they reached his lips. Emily was smiling. Not the forced, polite smile she gave her tutors, but a genuine childlike grin that lit up her whole face. It was a smile Richard hadn't seen in years. Inside the car, his chest tightened. His world of wealth and order suddenly felt powerless. Emily's laughter rang out, snapping him further. "Daddy, look," she shouted, noticing the car. She scrambled up and tugged at his arm as soon as the chauffeur opened the door. "David showed me division with stones. I get it now. I really understand." Richard turned to the boy. David's hands were dusty, but the numbers in the sand were neat and precise. The boy's eyes met his briefly. Sharp, intelligent eyes, full of a quiet dignity that no poverty could erase. Richard said nothing. His throat felt dry. For the first time in years, the man who commanded boardrooms and politicians alike was struck silent by a barefoot child with a sack of trash. That evening, the streets of Victoria Island were alive with noise, the blaring of car horns, hawkers weaving through traffic shouting, "Pure water, gala, cold minerals." But inside Richard Williams' mansion in Ikoyi, silence reigned. The mansion was vast, built with marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled under warm lighting. Security guards stood at the gate. House staff moved quietly in the background, yet the air felt empty. Richard sat alone in the living room, his jacket thrown across the armrest, his tie loosened, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table before him. His mind replayed the image of Emily, his daughter, sitting happily in the dust, laughing with a boy who picked bottles from trash bins. The sight gnawed at him. Richard prided himself on control over his business empire, over politics, even over how people perceived him. Yet today, control had slipped away in the most unexpected way. He picked up Emily's school notebook lying on the sofa. Neatly written in chalk across one page were sums and divisions, far clearer than the messy scrawls she usually made. It wasn't her handwriting. It was David's. Richard stared at the numbers for a long time, his hands trembling slightly. He thought of the tutors he had hired, experts from abroad, charging fees that could pay a man's salary for months. None of them had managed to get through to Emily, yet a boy from the streets had done it in minutes using stones and bottle caps. Richard's mind drifted back to his own childhood. He had grown up in a wealthy but loveless home. His father, a stern businessman, believed children needed discipline, not affection. His mother was distant, preoccupied with social appearances. Richard had been taught that success was measured by money, not happiness. He had carried those lessons into adulthood and into his parenting. He sighed heavily. Was history repeating itself? Was he failing Emily the same way his parents had failed him? The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. Emily padded into the room, still in her school uniform, her shoes off, holding her stuffed teddy bear. She smiled sleepily at him. "Daddy, David is so smart. He made me understand math. Can he come again?" Richard felt his chest tighten. He wanted to dismiss it, to brush it off as childish nonsense. But the light in Emily's eyes stopped him. It was a light he hadn't seen in years. His throat burned. For the first time in decades, a tear rolled down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away, ashamed of his own weakness. He whispered to himself, almost trembling, "Why did it take a boy with nothing to give my daughter everything she needed?" The whiskey sat untouched. Richard leaned back on the sofa, lost in thought, realizing that money had failed him in the one place it mattered most, his daughter's heart. The next afternoon, the school gates on Victoria Island buzzed with the usual rhythm. Parents' cars lined the roadside, drivers argued with security about parking, and hawkers squeezed between vehicles shouting, "Gala! Cold, pure water! Soft drinks!" The noise of Lagos traffic never stopped, but Richard Williams barely noticed any of it. He sat in his black Range Rover again, eyes scanning the street. He wasn't here just to pick Emily today. He was here for David. And there he was. The boy was crouched near the drainage, rummaging through a pile of discarded plastic bottles. His sack, patched in 3 places, sagged heavily over his small shoulders. He worked quickly, his thin hands moving with practiced efficiency. To passers-by, he was invisible, just another street child. But to Richard, his presence filled the street. Richard's jaw tightened. He stepped out of the car. Immediately, his bodyguards moved to follow, but with a wave of his hand, he ordered them to stay back. For the first time in years, the billionaire wanted no shield between himself and the truth he was chasing. David noticed him and froze. His eyes widened in alarm. Children like him were used to being shouted at, chased away, or beaten for trespassing. He clutched his sack tightly, ready to run. Richard raised a hand, his voice calmer than he expected. "Wait, I'm not here to harm you." David hesitated. His bare feet shifted uneasily on the hot pavement. His eyes, sharp and cautious, studied the tall man in a tailored suit. "You're David, aren't you?" Richard asked. The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." His voice was respectful but guarded. At that moment, Emily ran out of the school gate. "Daddy!" she called, dashing toward them. She hugged David first before holding her father's hand. "David's been helping me with math again. He's the best teacher I've ever had." Richard looked down at his daughter, then at the boy. David's face flushed, embarrassed but proud. "Who taught you all this?" Richard asked, his tone heavy with curiosity. David looked away, kicking the ground lightly. "No one, sir, I read the old books I find in the trash. Sometimes people throw away good ones. I keep them, and I study at night by the streetlights." Richard's chest tightened. In his world, knowledge was bought at the best schools and universities abroad. But here was a boy who had carved wisdom out of garbage. Emily tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can David come home with us today? Please?" For a long moment, Richard didn't answer. He was staring at David, really seeing him now. Not a ragged boy with a sack, but a child with the spark of something rare. The next day, the black Range Rover pulled into Ikoyi, its tinted windows reflecting the leafy streets lined with mansions and luxury cars. Security guards at Richard Williams' estate opened the massive gates, saluting as the vehicle rolled in. Inside the car, David sat nervously beside Emily, clutching his patched sack like a lifeline. His bare feet rubbed against the leather car mat, leaving faint dust marks. When the car stopped, David's eyes widened. Before him rose a white, marble-faced mansion with tall pillars, fountains gushing at the entrance, and gardeners trimming hedges with precision. He froze at the door, afraid to step on the polished floors. He had never seen such wealth up close, except on television when peeking through electronics shop windows. Emily, sensing his hesitation, grabbed his hand. "Come, David, don't worry. This is our home." Her voice was filled with warmth, as though she had brought a friend to a safe place. Richard, standing just behind them, observed carefully. He noticed David's wide eyes, his slow steps, his awe. For the first time, Richard felt shame. Shame at the abundance surrounding him, at the wastefulness he had grown used to. Inside, the mansion gleamed. A long dining table sat unused, chandeliers sparkled above, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted from the kitchen. David's eyes darted everywhere, but what caught him most was the sheer excess. Trays of untouched fruit, bowls of bread left cold, and plates being cleared by staff though barely eaten. He whispered, almost to himself, "So much food. Wasted." The words hit Richard like a blow. He had never noticed. He had never cared. Emily pulled David to the study room, a large space filled with shelves of imported books. David stopped again, staring. His fingers traced the spines of titles he had only heard of but never touched. "You have all these books?" he asked in disbelief. Richard, watching silently from the doorway, saw the boy's hunger for knowledge more clearly than ever. David sat with Emily at the mahogany study table. Emily spread out her homework eagerly, and David began explaining, using pencils and papers this time instead of stones. His voice grew steadier, more confident. His eyes lit up with every sum, every problem solved. Emily's laughter rang out again, bright and full. Richard leaned against the doorway, arms folded. But something inside him was unraveling. For years he had believed power was money, that intelligence was bought with tutors and schools. Yet here was a barefoot boy from the streets teaching with more patience, creativity, and effectiveness than anyone money could hire. Richard's throat tightened. His eyes burned. And then quietly, he walked in, lowering himself to one knee beside the boy. David froze, unsure. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice trembling. "David, you've given me something no amount of money could ever buy. You gave me my daughter's smile back." David's lips parted, shocked. He had never heard a man of such power speak with such humility. Emily looked between them, her small hands clasping theirs together. In that moment, 3 lives intertwined: wealth, innocence, and poverty, creating a bond that would change everything. Weeks later, the grand auditorium of the University of Lagos buzzed with anticipation. Rows of seats were filled with students, lecturers, journalists, and city dignitaries. Flashing cameras lined the front, reporters whispering about why one of Nigeria's most powerful billionaires had suddenly called a press event focused not on oil, not on real estate, but on education. At the center stage stood a long banner that read, "The David Williams Foundation for Underprivileged Children." The spotlight shifted as Richard Williams, dressed in a cream-colored agbada with gold embroidery, walked up to the podium. His presence commanded silence, but his voice carried a different tone from the man Lagos once knew, no longer cold, no longer distant. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "for years I thought wealth was measured by cars, mansions, and titles. But I was wrong. True wealth is measured by the lives we touch." He paused, scanning the audience. His eyes found David, seated in the front row beside his mother, who wore a simple wrapper and head tie. Tears glistened in her eyes as she held her son's hand tightly. Emily sat on David's other side, clapping proudly for her friend. Richard continued, I once believed money could buy knowledge, happiness, even love. But one day, outside the gates of my daughter's school, I saw something that changed me forever. I saw a boy with no shoes carrying a sack of trash, teaching my daughter mathematics in a way the best tutors could not. That boy's name is David. The crowd gasped, murmurs spreading across the hall. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked nonstop. Richard raised a hand. Today, in his honor, I am launching a scholarship fund that will ensure children like him, children who hunger for knowledge but are denied by poverty, will never have to search in garbage bins for books again. This is not charity. This is justice, for brilliance can rise from anywhere, even the streets. Applause thundered through the hall. Some stood to their feet, cheering. Richard stepped down from the podium and walked straight to David. Ignoring the flashing cameras, he bent low and embraced the boy tightly, his voice breaking into David's ear. You didn't just teach my daughter. You taught me how to live. David's small frame trembled. His eyes filled with tears, but he nodded, whispering back, Thank you, sir. But I only shared what I learned. The auditorium roared with applause again, but Richard barely heard it. For him, the real victory wasn't the cameras or the crowd. It was the boy in his arms and the smile on his daughter's face.